Hey everyone, I'm Clive.
Hey, I'm Louis.
And today we're going to talk about the online BIM execution planning workflow. A lot to cover. So one of the things that we'll talk about is, first of all, why plan? Why would we need to plan in the first place?
You always need a plan.
Surely you need a plan. But sometimes, even when you have a plan, it can be a challenge. So we've looked at why there's certain challenges in planning workflows in relation to BIM.
And a lot of these challenges are what we hear on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and what we struggled with when we were BIM managers ourselves.
Yes.
So very much identify with the challenges and the problems. But what we'll talk about, what the exciting part is, what if. So we'll talk about what if we had something that would cope with some of those challenges, and we'll talk about really in detail what that means for you guys as well. And then Louis will introduce the online BIM execution planning platform, and you can see how simple and quick and easy it is. And then we'll have a little preview of what's coming very soon as well, so stick around. And as Louis said earlier, any Q&A, if you have any questions, just type them in. Louis will be responding, tap, tap, tap on the side as we go through the webinar.
Yeah, and if I don't answer your question, I will respond after the webinar.
There you go. All right, so let's get started. Everyone understands that BIM is used for many different things. We're not going to talk in depth about these, but there's a plethora of different uses that you could use a model for. And we know that it can save us a lot of time, a lot of money in everything from design through construction and operations. But the big challenge is, how much BIM do we need and when do we need it? These images depict a great model, both ends of the spectrum, but which one do we need? We don't want to model too much, do we?
No, and you definitely want to get it right, because the one on the left compared to the one on the right, it's a huge cost difference. So definitely get it right.
Massive time and cost difference. Yeah. So what do we need? What do we need in order to be able to do this? Well, a lot of professionals around the world have made it standard practice now to create a plan. And those plans are what has been commonly known as a BIM execution plan. And they come in lots of different flavors. We have many different guidelines and many different really useful formats and templates around the world.
Globally known standard bodies, but some even from education.
Different university bodies,
universities.
Lots and lots of really useful information. And what people tend to do with it is create Word documents, use Excel files and different project management tools, and end up in PDFing, and then sometimes different other types of new project management tools depending on what type of workflows you're using. It can become a challenge, because what we see in the industry is, once we've created this great BIM execution plan, where does it go?
What happens?
What happens to it? Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes it ends up being placed in the bottom drawer and it gathers cobwebs, and it's not unfortunately brought out and used and collaborated on until there's a big problem, until there's some kind of dispute or some kind of disagreement in what was included and what wasn't included in that workflow, or who is responsible for something or who isn't responsible for something. There's a serious challenge when it comes to resolving those matters when it's too late. So that's great. We could have a BIM execution plan, but if we've got one and it's not used, then we may as well not have one.
I hope your cabinet files don't look like that.
So let's talk about making the impossible possible, and the challenges that we see in this workflow that we need to resolve in order for that to become a reality. Yeah. So there's many of them, bear with us. But so we talked about there, usually they're a Word document or some form of PDF. Usually they're created by one person. Unfortunately, what happens is we're copying and pasting from previous versions, and what that means is it causes unrealistic expectations to be carried forward. Sometimes not every project is going to adopt all of those BIM uses. It can take time to format, usually in a static document.
Not easy to manage, difficult to distribute, usually not collaborative, difficult to get buy-in. I know myself, I struggled people's contact list together. I'm like, okay, who's on this project? Let's start with
Who
that.
needs to buy into
Right.
it? Yeah.
And then who do I need to distribute the BIM execution plan before this BIM kickoff that I'm supposed to have?
Okay.
And then are they going to agree with that? The day of the BIM kickoff, we were kind of making those last minute agreements before the meeting in front of the subcontractors and everyone. So it was kind of like, I'm pretty sure we could have figured out a better way to
So it was
do
like
this a lot more simple.
trying to review and approve the whole thing,
Yeah.
but way too late. And
Right.
so it's difficult to get the right people involved.
Yep.
And then getting people's approval. So that one there, requiring another tool for an approval. Because it's a PDF file, it might need to be routed around with a different workflow to get people's approval.
And of course, there's all of that was a lot of administration work that
It takes a lot of time. And there are a lot of these guys. We actually stopped writing these because we ran out of space, not because we ran out of ideas. A real challenge when you're writing a scope and you're using just a text description, sometimes it's difficult to define what the inclusions and what the exclusions are. And if you're writing, for example, just the exclusions, then it could mean that you miss something and you end up unknowingly including so much more. The spreadsheets with simple numbers we've found very difficult, and you always have to refer to other areas or other guidelines. And there's lots of different standards out there.
So if they don't know the standards, and then you're trying to create an agreement with, say, owners or different parties that just don't understand, you find yourself talking about the definition as to the important things that are required on this plan.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult to agree when everything's in lots of different places, and
you keep having to go to the dictionary to say, okay, what does this mean? What is that?
Yeah, and it's great. We all need that dictionary,
Right.
But when you're trying to deal with it in a single dimension, a spreadsheet, for example, without that database of rich knowledge behind it, it can be a real challenge. Totally disconnected from the standards and disconnected from the rest of the workflow that we see. Not simple, difficult to understand who's responsible for what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You kind of get the idea here. And this is all culminating into, unfortunately, number 26 there. What we found was this is what happens because it's not a live document, or you're not managing to have it in a way that people can collaborate on and continue to agree on and get buy-in on. And after it gets version 1.2, for example, it then gets printed and put in the bottom drawer and then forgotten about. The implication of those challenges pretty severe. Not having a lean workflow. We talked about all of the additional time and administrative work that you would have. The end result could be confusion and misunderstanding, which leads to blame. People pointing fingers at each other. Timely decisions must be planned out. The liability that people take on, and that all is obviously risk and additional costs. So there are significant implications in not getting the plan correct. So we see this as being the wrong way of doing things. This is a challenge for our industry, and what we're really looking at is how can we get the right way. So